women's final has been previewed and predicted, and now it's time to turn our attention to the men, where the top two seeds will be facing off. There's big stuff on the line. Either it's a maiden Grand Slam title for number 2 seed Daniil Medvedev, or it is the calendar Grand Slam for the top seed Novak Djokovic. Abigail Johnson back with you to take you through the look ahead to this match. Now, a couple of apologies, first and foremost. I know that we are approaching the women's final that is going to take place shortly. I don't film on Sundays, so it was now or never. So I will be briefer with this video. I will not be overlapping into that final. Also, because I have to do it now as opposed to later on, I haven't quite had as much time looking at stats and that kind of thing as I would have liked. However, I've been keeping an eye on these two. I've been taking notes on their matches, particularly the semi-finals, and I think I have a good idea of kind of what to expect in this showdown. So if you can't watch live, do not worry. This will be up on the channel at some point once we finish streaming live, and you will be able to watch it back at a later date. There's a lot to look forward to with this clash. This is the second time this year that these two are facing off in a Grand Slam final, so that tells you about their consistency. And with Medvedev, it shows you about his consistency in New York over the past few years. He's made the semi-finals each of the last 3 years, and this is his second time in 3 years in the final. So do not expect him to just roll over, because Djokovic has a major trophy up for grabs. So we will do as we often do. We will look at the paths of both players to this stage. We'll pay particular attention to the most recent match, the semi-final, because you can glean a lot from that in terms of what to expect in the final round. Then we'll have a brief look at the head-to-head and talk about what to expect from these two in Sunday's showdown. Okay, and you can use the live chat, of course, as ever, and share your opinions, and feel free to leave a comment afterwards to let me know which way you are going with this one, because I have to make a prediction, and I am going to put a finer point on this one than I did with the women's final earlier. So it's the top two seeds. I have to say I have a lot of respect for this. We've got two contrasting, really good finals at this US Open. You've got the breakout stars on the WTA, the two teenagers, but here you've got sheer elite consistency. At the beginning of the tournament, all the talk was of Alexander Zverev and Daniil Medvedev being the only two players with real chances to knock off Djokovic. And lo and behold, they lived up to their seeding and made it through to face Djokovic at the back end. And I have a lot of respect for that. The likes of Zverev and Medvedev and up-and-comers below them have been given a lot of flack and a lot of stick for not having won a Grand Slam yet and not having closed the gap between the big three more. But actually, I think Medvedev and Zverev and Tsitsipas and team have done a brilliant job to close that gap as much as they have, and to be consistent forces at the back end of Grand Slams. So credit to them. And as we always do here, we're going to start by taking a look at the run of the lower ranked player, which is Daniil Medvedev. A shout out to everyone watching live. I know it's not ideal time zones for everywhere in the world, particularly Australia, but appreciate you tuning in. So Medvedev, he's had some deceptively tricky opponents on the way, but no standout top names, and he has looked very solid and just taken it all in his stride as the elite professional that he is. So he got started with a first round over Richard Gasquet, former major semi-finalist himself. Gasquet has dropped off a little in terms of sustained form, and he's had injuries recently, but he's still no pushover. He knows what it takes to go up against the best in the game and win. So that was something of a nasty opening match, but Medvedev got it done 6-4, 6-3, 6-1, sorry. So far, he's only dropped one set across the 6 matches that he has played, which is pretty emphatic stuff, as was the 88% of first serves won in that match against Gasquet, which was kind of a foreshadowing of what was to come for Medvedev, because he has been landing some very decent first serve numbers, which I think will help him out in the final showdown. So for Medvedev, a straight sets win to kick off, another against Dominic Kopfer, another player who can be tricky. Some of you might remember that Roland Garros match against Roger Federer. The German was giving him trouble, but no such fortune against Medvedev, 6-4, 6-1, 6-2. For Medvedev, again, the first serve win percentage in the 80s. That has been a consistent theme for Medvedev all the way through this event. It's been getting him cheap points when he needs to stay in touch, and it's been setting him up to break through. So that's been a big weapon for him. Pablo Andujar just didn't stand a chance, unfortunately, in the third round. 6-love, 6-4, 6-3. Conditions much more in the favor of Medvedev, who at this point had some match play, was finding his stride. Pretty straightforward job. It was expected to be less straightforward against Dan Evans, who is into his fourth round here at the US Open. The number 24 seed, so the first seeded player that Medvedev had come up against. And Evans is tricky. He's got, again, the backhand slice. He can rally well on the back foot. He's got all sorts of little tricks to get him back into things. He's been really upping his level, Evans, and he can play from all areas of the court. So that had the potential to throw Medvedev's rhythm a bit. Didn't do anything of the sort. 6-3, 6-4, 6-3. For Medvedev, who only faced 2 break points in the entirety of the match and had 8 break points of his own. I think Evans was a little bit disappointed after that match that he couldn't do more, but had to credit the relentlessness of Daniil Medvedev. He has really been working his way up to elite status in a way that almost makes it look ordinary. He is really finding his stride now, Medvedev. That epic run to the ATP finals title at the end of last year, it was such a high level. The question was, could he sustain it? And he has. He took it straight into the Australian Open and reaching the final there. So credit to Medvedev. He did drop a set, though, in the quarterfinal against Botic van der Zandschulp. Now, it was interesting for me to track the rise of van der Zandschulp at this event, a qualifier, and I remember interviewing him and covering him at an ITF event back in 2019. So he's come through really well, but he just couldn't match the consistency of Medvedev and the marks that Medvedev was able to find on the court. So it was 6-3, 6-love, 4-6, 7-5. Now that might have raised a few eyebrows that Medvedev dropped a set there when he was serving to stay in the third set. He got broken. And it might have questioned whether there was a little bit of vulnerability, but he went back to restoring order in the semi-finals with a straight sets win over Felix Auger-Aliassime, the number 12 seed, 6-4, 7-5, 6-2. Now I have to be really careful that I'm not mean here. Auger-Aliassime, I've rated him for a long time. He's been around a long time. He was a very successful junior. He's been a prospect for a while, and he has been carefully working his way up. He's been working hard. He's joined forces with Tony Nadal as a coach, and we're seeing the positive changes there. And he has so much going for him, Auger-Aliassime. He has the ability to play from different areas of the court. He has the firepower on the forehand. He has the ability to come up to the net, which he utilized against Medvedev when plan A wasn't working. It was good to see that from him, shifting through his options. But there is a mental battle with Auger-Aliassime at the moment. He's reached, I don't know how many ATP finals now, and hasn't been able to win a single one of them. He was pushing at Wimbledon and did make the quarterfinals. He did a good job there, and he is making these little steps of progress. But it seems to be a recurring theme with Auger-Aliassime that he gets up to the line, but he can't quite cross it. He should have won that second set against Medvedev. 5-2 up he was in the second. Medvedev won the next 5 games on the trot. There was just this moment of doubt for Auger-Aliassime, trying to make the right moves. But when you come up the court, you have to have the conviction to match the forward movement, to match the confidence of the approach. And maybe a little bit lacking with Medvedev and his ability at the back of the court. So a tough one for Auger-Aliassime to take, because really the things that need fixing are quite small, and once he's fixed them, he's going to be away. But at the moment, Auger-Aliassime not quite a stern force at the back end of a major. He's not won an ATP title, full stop. So it was difficult to see him winning this major. And for me, on both the women's side and the men's side, that was the easiest call for Medvedev to win that in straights in the semis. Medvedev himself honestly didn't look too flashy, too impressive until the end of the match when he was just flying through. He looked solid. I thought he was landing the balls that he needed to. The way that Medvedev moves, sometimes it looks like he's not making as much effort as he is because he's a tall guy. He can cover the court in a couple of strides. And he's got these kind of lazy looking ground strokes, which are actually so effective. But the thing with Medvedev is he knows exactly when to peak, exactly when to deliver. He doesn't peak too early. He just keeps himself in it. And it was in that first set against Auger-Aliassime, up to 3-all, little to separate the two. Suddenly Medvedev, forehand, big points, and breaks for 4-3, and that was all he needed. So he's definitely developing that mindset of knowing when he needs to come through and not exerting too much energy in the meantime, Medvedev. So that was a very solid semi-final win to take him in rather low-key fashion into another Grand Slam final. Now, this is Grand Slam final number 3 for Medvedev. His first, of course, was here 2 years ago when he took on Rafael Nadal, and I've said it before, I'll say it again, nearly pulled off the comeback that I've seen in my lifetime. 2 sets and a breakup, you thought Nadal had it, and Medvedev came roaring back and nearly had it in 5. So you certainly should not be writing this guy off, particularly in New York, but he's going to have stiff competition. He's going to be facing the man that has won all 3 Grand Slams already played this season. That is, of course, Novak Djokovic. Now, Djokovic has had a tougher run in terms of seeds and in terms of caliber of opposition than Medvedev. I don't think it's quite the contrast of the women's side where Leylah Fernandez has played former top 20 or current top 20 players, including Grand Slam champions, all the way through, and Raducanu just hasn't. But it is a similar kind of split here in that Djokovic has beaten Matteo Berrettini and Alexander Zverev in the last couple of rounds to make this final. And he's had it pretty tough, to be fair, from the get-go against Holger Rune in the first rounds. Rune was the junior number 1, and he is, in kind of Dominic Thiem style, just thoroughly obsessed with tennis. And you knew that because he eats it up and he lives and breathes it, and because he's probably watched countless Novak Djokovic matches in his lifetime, he was going to come into that night match in the first round ready to soak it all in. And he definitely did. He had the crowd roaring behind him. He showed off his athleticism, his ability at the front of the court. But Djokovic is so mentally tough, and I just feel like a stuck record when it comes to Djokovic. But he has this robotic brilliance about him that really makes him tough to knock down. So 6-1, 6-7, 6-2, 6-1 for Djokovic. Now, Rune was cramping a little bit at the back end of the match. Djokovic had respect for that, but he didn't let it distract him. He did not let anything deter his laser focus, and so he came through that in 4 sets and then moved into, and this is going to sound very interesting, the only match to date that he's won in straight sets. Now, that is not a normal stat for Djokovic at a slam. You usually expect him to kind of roll through the earlier rounds or the latter rounds, wherever it may be. There tends to be a clump of matches that he's winning in fairly straightforward fashion. Has not been the case in New York, and it's understandable. It's been a long season. He's won the majority of the big titles on offer, and so he is going to be feeling the fatigue a bit. That gives Medvedev a little bit of hope, but it didn't give any hope to Telon Griekspoor, 6-2, 6-3, 6-2 in the second rounds. And from there, it has been a bit of a graft in every match for Djokovic. He did lose the opening set in his next 3 matches against Kei Nishikori, Jensen Brooksby, and Matteo Berrettini. Oh, what a lineup of opponents. So Nishikori first off, there were some grueling rallies in that one, and at the end it was just Djokovic who was the mentally and physically sharper to close things out. You know, we know about Nishikori's issues with the injuries and all of that kind of thing, and credit to him for keeping it as close as he did, because he was swept aside by Djokovic at the Tokyo Olympics. But it was the Djokovic win 6-7, 6-3, 6-3, 6-2. And then Jensen Brooksby. Now, what a match against Brooksby. Brooksby has most recently been playing a lot on the ATP Challenger Tour. He's 20 years old. He is definitely a name to keep in mind for the future. He can do all sorts on the court. He is a real disruptor of rhythm, and he backs himself. So people were expecting big things from that match, and they got it straight off when Brooksby absolutely rifled his way to the 6-1 opening set against Djokovic. And he was impressively backing himself in that second set. There was a 20 or 19-minute return game when he was down on the scoreboard, when he was down a break, where Brooksby actually broke Djokovic back. Now, Djokovic, 19-minute service game, the ball on his racket to start every point, you'd take Djokovic there. But that just shows how Brooksby was able to grind him down, take the time away from him, use every part of the court, and really give Djokovic trouble. But again, you've got to credit the staying power and the mentality and the focus of Djokovic, because after Brooksby had won that 19-minute game to go back to 3-2, Djokovic just dug straight back in. He didn't flinch, he didn't blink, he got straight to it. And it has got to be so intimidating to go up against that kind of composure. So it was an epic opening couple of sets in that match, and Brooksby deserves a lot of praise. But once Djokovic had got the second set, he was in cruise control, really. And that tells you a lot about how much it takes out of a player just to keep him that close. So 1-6, 6-3, 6-2, 6-2. I think on that occasion, the set that he lost was more to do with the quality of his opponent than any failing of his own. So then we moved into the quarterfinals. He faced Matteo Berrettini, his victim in the Wimbledon final. And Berrettini, he's just ready-made at the moment to cause trouble. He's really developed his game. It was here 2 years ago that he started breaking through, making semis, and the forehand is a hammer blow. The serve is brilliant, gets him so many cheap points. And I think what really let him down in that Wimbledon final, and I was quite concise with my video because I kind of thought this would be the deciding factor, he just lacked experience. Here we have Djokovic, who's won 20 Grand Slam titles, 19 at that point, and Berrettini, who was in his first Grand Slam final. And when you're up against the likes of Djokovic, there is very little substitute for experience. I think Dominic Thiem actually reiterated that. He's been doing a bit of punditry, some very, very good stuff. But Berrettini, he got the opening set again, so it's the same rhythm. But I think the fact that Djokovic had already lost 2 opening sets in the previous 2 matches and was able to rebound, that probably helped him to keep the composure and to stay calm and to peak at the moments that he needed to. Again, Djokovic's serve, I feel, has been underrated for a while. It has been a key piece of groundwork for his game in recent years, and the way he isn't afraid to be aggressive on the second serve and the placement that he gets under pressure. Won that one, Djokovic 5-7, 6-2, 6-2, 6-3, and then it was the 5-set semi-final against Alexander Zverev, the man who I initially thought had the best chance of beating Djokovic at this event. I think what probably worked against him in that regard was the fact that he'd beaten Djokovic in impressive fashion in the Olympic semi-finals. I know that's a completely different scenario, best of 3-set match, but I think that it's so tough to beat Djokovic at 2 big events in a row unless your name is Roger Federer or Rafael Nadal, and even for them it's really tough. It was a big ask for Zverev, but at the same time, it was kind of like a two-edged sword, because it was tough because Djokovic had recent memories to work with and didn't want to let that happen again, but it was also evident that that had given Zverev some confidence. Without that win in the Olympics, I don't know, although he's been developing in this department, I don't know if Zverev would have taken this to 5 sets. He had a great composure after some really brutal moments to lose the second and third sets. He could very easily have hung his head and looked crushed there, Zverev, because he played a great match. He really did. So he took the opening set, deja vu, 6-4. So that is 4 matches in a row now where Djokovic has lost the opening set. So that is going to settle him if Medvedev is making things tough early on in the final. But eventually for Djokovic, 4-6, 6-2, 6-4, 4-6, 6-2. A lot of long rallies in that match. Now, Zverev and Medvedev are two of the only players that can really stay with Djokovic at the moment from the back of the court. And Zverev took his chances. He was well balanced. I thought that he kept a lid on his frustrations incredibly well throughout the duration of the match. He knew that he could not afford to expend energy. And he responded. He kept himself well. Even if things didn't go his way, he committed to going toe-to-toe with Djokovic. I think one thing that he did particularly well early on in the match was keep the rallies quite central. Djokovic, as we know, is a human elastic band, and he has no trouble with his lateral movement. Zverev wasn't giving him so many angles. He was getting very, very good consistent length on his ground strokes and good whip and pace on the ball as well. And as he was sending that quite central in the court, Djokovic didn't have a lot to rip into. He was held back, and at times he was uncomfortable. It did also cause Djokovic to pull the trigger too early, maybe on a few forehands in the opening set, and that was what really made the difference and got Zverev the one break that decided the set. But we know Djokovic, he resets, he serves well under pressure, and Zverev did tighten up at the beginning of the second. He had a chance to break through right at the start of the set. Djokovic held on, and immediately Zverev's utter quality, and it was utter quality, of the opening set deserted him. Tightness the moment he was down on the scoreboard. And if anything was shown from this semi-final, it was how key it is to make sure the deeper you go into the match that Djokovic is not serving first in this set, because he puts so much pressure on you anyway with his court coverage, with his consistency, with his weapons. You do not want him to have the added weapon of scoreboard pressure, because you will feel that with the lack of openings against Djokovic. And I think Zverev felt it, and I think it cost him ultimately. So at the end of the fourth set, when Zverev was up in it, he had the opportunity to break through and start the fifth set on serve. He was, I think, 30 all at 5-3 up on the return, and he had a look at a second serve, and the couple of forehands that he hit were passive. Now, it's crazy that a whole outcome of a match can come down to something as small as that, but honestly, I feel like that was the deciding factor. He just sat back a little bit on those forehands. Djokovic ripped a backhand winner. Djokovic held serve. Zverev served out the set, and lo and behold, Djokovic is serving first in the decider, and he's immediately put the scoreboard pressure on and very quickly opened up the 4-1 lead. And I don't think that would have happened if Zverev was serving first in the decider. So things that look small at the time, actually, if you look ahead, they can make a big difference. Zverev did hold himself together really well to get that fourth set, but it says a lot about the mental fortitude of Djokovic that that fifth set, once he was at 3-love, felt like a foregone conclusion. Zverev fought back at the end, but Djokovic had given himself the safety net, and so he had no qualms about breaking to finish off the match. And so the top two seeds have made the final and made it look pretty routine, to be fair, which tells you a lot about the consistency and the quality and the confidence that's at the top of the men's game at the moment. So I did spend a little bit more time with detail on those matches than I intended, so I'll wrap up this end of the video quite quickly now as we look at the head-to-head. Now, the head-to-head is an interesting one here because it's actually pretty close. Djokovic leads at 5-3, so he's only 2 wins out in front. He also leads at 3-1 on outdoor hard courts. So if we have a quick look at the head-to-head, they first faced off in 2017. That was on indoor hard courts at the Davis Cup. Djokovic won that via retirement, but he won the next one in a completed match, semi-finals of Eastbourne 2017, 6-4, 6-4 for Djokovic. Then they faced off at the 2019 Australian Open. So this was just before Medvedev really started to piece his game together and come through as a major contender. Djokovic won that one 6-4, 6-7, 6-2, 6-3, and I think that Medvedev gained a lot from that match and put it into practice when they faced off in Monte Carlo and Cincinnati later that year. Medvedev winning both those matches in 3 sets 6-3, 4-6, 6-2, and 3-6, 6-3, 6-3. Now, it doesn't really matter where the wins come. If you have wins over Djokovic, whatever surface it's on, it's going to give you confidence. And the fact that Medvedev has beaten Djokovic at the back end of a big event on an outdoor hard court, Cincinnati 2019, when he was in red hot form in the USA, that will give him confidence. So the most recent meetings were 2 in 2020 and 1 earlier this year. As we know, Djokovic has won 2 of the last 3. So he won their meeting at the 2020 ATP Cup in 3 sets, 6-1, 5-7, 6-4. Medvedev won their meeting at the ATP Finals, and I'm going to comment on this one. That was 6-3, 6-3. And then Djokovic won at that Australian Open final in straight sets. Now, I think those last 2 matches that they've played against each other are the most significant for differing reasons. The first of those, the ATP Finals that Medvedev won in straight sets, Djokovic was fatigued at the end of a long season, and Medvedev was all over him. He pulled him around on a piece of string, and I have rarely seen Djokovic that helpless on a tennis court. Even his serve couldn't save him. Medvedev, of course, was at the peak of his powers at that point, and he was riding momentum. But at the same time, Djokovic didn't have answers, and that was quite an eye-opener for me. And that result, I think, is of significance because I don't think Djokovic has played his best tennis in New York. Maybe that should be expected because champion that he is, he knows he doesn't want to peak too early and needs to peak at the back end of a slam. So he could well come out on Sunday and play by far his best tennis of the tournament. But I think that there is definitely mental and physical fatigue. If there wasn't, as well as Zverev played, I don't think he'd have lost at the Olympics. And yet going into the Olympics, I knew that he had to lose either there or at the US Open because he'd just done so much winning. And even for someone like Djokovic, that is going to take its toll at some point. So Medvedev, I think, should draw confidence from that he has gone up against a slightly deflated Djokovic before and been calling all the shots. But then on the flip side, you've got that meeting at the Australian Open, and those that have watched my content and my analysis for a long time will know that I'm very skeptical still when it comes to these guys up against the top players, Nadal, Djokovic, and Federer, in Grand Slam finals. I think that they are brilliant at the Masters 1000 events and pretty much level with these guys now. I think that prior to the final rounds of majors, they've also got great shots at the upset, which is partly why I was thinking Zverev had a better chance of taking down Djokovic than Medvedev, because Zverev got to face him in semis as opposed to the final when there was a trophy directly on the line. Medvedev has got the hard job with having to take him down at the final hurdle. It is so tough when Djokovic is just inches away from that trophy. And the Australian Open really showed that. I had been so convinced by Medvedev's form and a little bit skeptical regarding Djokovic's that I was almost ready to go with Medvedev on that occasion. I had a real dilemma. I thought it was incredibly 50-50 and I just edged towards Djokovic based on his experience in Grand Slam finals and his record in Melbourne. That was all that edged it for me. And then he went out and he won it in straight sets. Now, Medvedev has said that he did not play to the best of his ability in that match, that he had reserves that he didn't use. I think that he got more frustrated than he should have done. And by all accounts, he will take that and he will learn from it this time around. But it does make me hesitant to big up Medvedev's chances here because I felt like he was in better form in Melbourne than he was in New York. I think Medvedev has been solid here. And it's impressive that he's only dropped 1 set, but then his road to this stage has not been as tough as Djokovic's. So I think that you've got 2 very interesting recent meetings to look at there. Now, going into the final, Medvedev's first serve stats have been slightly stronger all the way through. Djokovic is landing his first serves within the 60s. So he's had it was somewhere in the mid 60s of first serves landed, and then probably averaging in the 70s first serve points won, which are decent numbers, but I think he's got to take that first serve percentage up a bit against Medvedev, because Medvedev and Zverev are going to be the best returners that he's gone up against. And he's been winning a very strong amount of second serve points throughout the tournament, Djokovic, up until he faced Zverev. And he went from winning 73% of his second serve points against Berrettini to only 45, dropping below that 50% mark for the first time against Zverev. And Medvedev, with the way he stands deep in the court, with the reach he's got on both sides, he's going to get a lot more returns back in play with depth and with the ability to follow up behind and get his teeth straight into the rally. So Djokovic's first serve percentage, I feel, needs to be higher. And in his favour is the fact that he did creep up that first serve percentage from the previous rounds. Medvedev is just strong across the service stats, and that will stand him in good stead. But I think that he faces a little bit of a dilemma, because in this big of a match, as it was shown with Zverev, it is incredibly, incredibly tough to beat Djokovic from the baseline. And credit to Zverev, he hung with Djokovic, he overpowered him at times, he bided his time in the right moments, although there was one moment where he didn't at the back end of the third set, and it cost him the set. But Zverev played as well from the baseline pretty much as one can against Djokovic and still didn't get the win. Medvedev is a baseline lover. He would stay there all day, and he and Zverev are two of the only players that can go toe-to-toe with Djokovic from the baseline and outlast him on occasion. So I think that he should look to do that. I think that if a rally has gone to 12 or 15 shots, then he should keep going at the baseline. We saw Zverev win that 53-shot rally against Djokovic. One of the biggest Djokovic pitfalls for opponents is the fact that they get impatient, they get doubtful, and they pull the trigger too early in the long rallies. If a rally is going that length of time, I think Medvedev needs to hang with it, because Djokovic did leak some errors against Zverev. But I don't think he can win this match rallying from the baseline on every single point. He needs to try and keep it quick behind the serve, and I think he needs to surprise Djokovic a little bit, move up the court at times, pull Djokovic down low into the forecourt and set up to pass him. That kind of thing, just so that Djokovic doesn't get a rhythm. And he's got to have great focus in order to do that, because it's very easy to become distracted. But at the end of the day, Djokovic is one win away from the calendar Grand Slam, which is just something extraordinary when you look at the era that he's been in, with 13-time French Open champion Rafael Nadal, with Roger Federer, who's also got 20 Grand Slam titles. The fact that he's on the brink of doing this is just monumental, and I would not expect to see him stumble at the final hurdle. There have been vulnerabilities for Djokovic this tournament, and if Medvedev can go out there with a total underdog mindset, even as he pursues his first Grand Slam title and knows what an opportunity it is, if he can go out there and play loose and freely and full of joy like a Leylah Fernandez or an Emma Raducanu, if he can do that and embody that mentality, then he will definitely have chances here. But I am not about to predict against Novak Djokovic when he's got this major trophy on the line, and when he has said that he will go out there and treat this match like it is the very last match of his career. He is going to put every ounce of himself into this contest, and I think that you've got to favour him at the end of the day. I'm not writing Medvedev off. I think that he comes out with the right mentality and the right game plan. He's proven he's got wins over Djokovic. He can do this, and a maiden major title has to come at some point for Medvedev. It cannot be far away. But it's been Novak Djokovic's year, and he's looking to make his stamp on it again this time around. So I'm not willing to predict against Djokovic ahead of this match. I'm more than happy to be proven wrong, but I will say Novak Djokovic to win the US Open for his 4th major title of the season, for a historic 21st Grand Slam overall and the calendar Grand Slam. And because he has had some struggles to date, and because Daniil Medvedev has swaggered into this final and looked pretty content with his tennis and his position in the competition, I'm going to say that it is a bit of a fight, and I'll say Novak Djokovic to win in 5 sets. So, thank you for tuning in. I know it was not ideal timing to do this live, but there have been a few people here watching live, so thank you for that, and thanks for using the live chat. I will be looking back through that at a later date. If you're coming here at a later time, then leave a comment, let me know what you thought of these two players throughout the tournament and who you would be predicting to come out on top of another fantastic final lineup. So we've wrapped it up. We've done a preview for the women, a preview for the men. I am not sure when I will next be back, but in order to be tuned for when that occurs, hit subscribe, hit the notifications bell, and you will be alerted when I'm back in the building. I'm back to work in a couple of days, back on the UK Pro League. So if you want to watch the UK Pro League, which Emma Raducanu won last summer to launch herself towards what she's doing now, that is available to be watched on BT Sport Extra, on Tennis Channel International, and via UK Pro League TV. So if you want to hear my voice on those matches, the tournament that Raducanu, or the series league that Raducanu won last summer, feel free to tune in. But that's it for me when it comes to commentary on the US Open. So thank you very much for tuning in. I hope you really enjoy both finals. I'm sure that I'll be tuning in and looking forward to seeing how both play out. We've just got to wait and see. So thank you very much for watching, and whenever it may be, I will see